Hello, a very warm welcome to everyone for yet another online discussion on Talking Films Online. This week we have watched the film Anna Karenina, and we will be discussing the film today. The film was suggested by Professor V. Krishnappa, and we're really looking forward to the discussion that he will be initiating today. Professor Krishnappa is a philosopher and the head of the philosophy program at the School of Liberal Arts and Sciences, RV University, Bangalore. He's also the director of RV University's Mahatma Gandhi Center for Contemporary Ethics. Professor Krishnappa's teaching and research interests include ancient Greek philosophy, continental philosophy, the work of Wittgenstein, Tolstoy, philosophical and literary readings, philosophy and liberal arts education, pedagogy, and critical thinking. We are indeed very happy and very honored, sir, to have you lead the discussion on a wonderful film. I think all of us quite enjoyed watching this film. So we are very happy that you will be leading the discussion on this film. Over to you. So we are not able to hear you.
Sorry. I was saying, thanking Professor Nikhila and Professor Vishwanath for this wonderful invitation to share my thoughts on watching Anna Karenina, the 2012 film. I'm no expert in cinematic studies. I have interest in Russian literature. My philosophical development emerges out of reading Anna Karenina. I have a deep interest in realist novels in general, besides the Russian realism of Dostoevsky, Chekhov, and Tolstoy. As you know, that Anna Karenina is one of the most cinematized, if I may use that word, novel, most adapted novel. I suspect there are about 20 versions of this novel being translated into cinema from silent era to the present, the last being 2012. This besides dramatizations in various languages and cultures and adaptations in a more subtle ways, more not so direct ways, as is the case with 2012 film that we have watched. I'm always hesitant to watch these kind of adaptations. I'm always suspicious of their ability to do a good job. But this one, I suppose, after having many iterations watching them, emerges as a bit more palatable to someone like me. This is a kind of a confession I'm making. I'm always wary about this medium's ability to capture the processuality of character development because of the speed at which the images move and lack of space or time constraints that a medium imposes. The very form itself imposes certain restrictions. But this one, there's a bit of a clever adaptation that captures to a much better degree the experience of a realist developmental novel. What I mean by developmental novel is that many of you must be coming from literary genre, literary studies, so you possibly know this, that the character grows in the novel. So in this, there are three parallel uh, stories. Actually, in Anna Karenina, there are three main parallel stories that go parallelly together, but they interconnect at times, meet each other. One is the duo of Ronsky, the trio of Ronsky, Karenin, and Anna, that is largely at play in this particular movie. The other is Dolly and Steva, which is largely ignored, even in the novel, even though that some suspect is the most significant relationship so far as it concerns author's ability to tell a moral story. But it occupies about 20% in the novel, space in the novel. The third being Kitty and Levin, which occupies equal amount of space in the novel, but not so much in the movie. All the movies tend to foreground the romantic, tragic relationship of Anna Karenina and Ronsky, whereas in the novel is proportioned somewhat like this: 40% for Kitty Levin, 40% for Ronsky, Karenin, and Anna, and about 20% for Dolly and Steva. So I just want to understand the movie in a way, bringing some extra textual, as in extra movie material into import it or slightly import it so that we have more richer context to understand what you watched in the movie itself. So one way of reading the Ronsky, the triangle of Ronsky, Karenin, and Anna is a story of romantic love that by definition goes wrong. So it is, tragedy is built into the very romantic idea of what it means to be in love. And you see this played out in multiple times. There is an explicit mention that, one is in love, therefore everything has to be accommodated to allow for that passion to play out. Then you have Dolly Oblonsky, that is Steva Oblonsky, a couple who in the novel represent the prosaic form of love, the ordinary family love, which is not to suggest that it is either pure or simple or any of that, but one which is actually highly conflicted. So the novel begins with discovery of infidelity on part of Steva, and it ends for most purposes in the seventh book in the novel ends with Anna's suicide, and this movie almost ends there. What later became book 8, an epilogue, which is very, very crucial part of the book, even though it was written almost like an epilogue, commentary on contemporary events around Russia at that time. So the prosaic or the ordinary forms of love, which some critiques have suggested is something that the author, the Tolstoy, wanted to foreground and celebrate and condemn and punish the romantic idea of love. It is not to condemn and punish Anna Karenina, but the very idea of semiotic totalizing of a romantic concept of love, which essentially seeks or seeks to think through categories and absolutes, extremes. As a consequence, one has to end tragically because you don't make accommodations to the uncertainties and impurities of everyday life. So then you have Levin and Kitty. We know that Kitty initially rejects Levin's proposal to marry, and they have been childhood friends, which is not something that is brought out well in the movie. They're connected as a family, and Levin is to visit the family, and these are three sisters, Dolly, who is wife of Steva, being the eldest, and Kitty, and there is one more middle sister who is not mentioned in the movie, but he is very much in the original text. So, Levin and uh, 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 Kitty struggle. They develop a lot through the novel. We don't see that very much, that process of development and evolution very much present in the movie. In the movie, there is a happy, uh, a kind of a stable marital life. There is love, there is family, there is everyday care. Whereas in the novel, uh, it is it has a bit more richness and complexity that goes missing, because the focus is mostly on Karenin and Ronsky and Anna. What are we to make of experiencing a text like this, taking this movie as a text? So even though I'm clouded with a lot of background information, I often struggle with making the connections as to how these movie makers are, trying to capture the essence or the spirit of the story, so that you create an approximate experience of the text itself. And often I felt, oh, this is so clever. Although there's a lot of this is very fantastic, like, grand staging, and very expensive kind of. I'm sure they spend millions creating and recreating those stages and those costumes and what have you. I felt that they largely remained faithful to the fact, the complexity of the evolution of relationship between these three, mainly. There's a marginal significance or marginal importance given to other two tracks in the novel, in the movie. So you have essentially a story of a person accidentally meeting Ronsky while she came on a mission to help her brother reconcile with his wife, who has just discovered that he has been cheating on her. He has been cheating on her not with anybody but a former governess whom she knew. And you have in Stiva, both in the novel and here, apathetic character, someone who takes life too lightly, to have that kind of a care and attention a family like his would deserve. And he's shallow, both in the book and here, of course, not without virtues. And no character in Tolstoy's novels are without virtues. They're very complex and they're very rich characters, and it's very difficult to for the reader to decide to completely put a label and dismiss a character. But by and large, Stiva is shallow. His ideologies come not from his own thinking, but from that which he imbibes from his everyday social activities that he takes for granted. And he doesn't even know the pain he's causing to others. And he takes life too lightly. That is essentially both in the novel and the movie one says. But Anna is a very passionate, very serious, very profound character, and she is also a great reader herself. She reads us in the novel what is known as the English novel, quote unquote. And she was literate, educated, passionate, and somewhat felt trapped in a marriage to an older man, a marriage which itself was a trap, done through manipulation by her aunt. And now she meets this young, very attractive officer who serves in the guards, which is a very prestigious position in those times for young people to be in. And she could not quite resist her inner temptations to fall in love with him. While she is in denial at some level, her consciousness is taking her closer and closer to Vronsky, to a point where she starts deceiving herself about what's going on. And eventually the relationship consummates, a child, and then all the complexities that go with the society at that time, and also the legal legal processes involved in it, which is to say she couldn't divorce easily, unlike in our times, and that ambiguity of the relationship, which she herself, when offered an exit out of that, she refuses because she could not resolve within herself the complex emotional dynamics at play. And as a consequence, she loses a sense of capacity to regulate her own life, her emotional and interior aspects of her life, which brings her to a stage of both perplexity, not only for herself, but and expectations that others could not manage. That is, particularly Vronsky could not quite meet to the challenge of being in romantic love, the way she maps it, she expects, and she wants it to be enacted. And she has to end up entering into a descending spiral towards suicide. And that is mostly how the movies have tended to, the Hollywoodization of Anna Karenina has tended to do. But what goes missing here is this caricatured way of, very skeletal way of narrating. What goes missing is, if those of you who have read know this, the book 7, chapter 23 to the end, would know the dialogue, the inner dialogue that we see bits of it. Like when you saw the movie, you saw that she sees human beings standing still. They're all emptied out of any interiority, and she's grown apathetic towards human condition and her own ability to reconcile with the complex nature of life itself. And so that the spiral is, I have not seen in any other novel that kind of a psychology at display. These chapters are worth reading to understand how someone could really reach this state of suicidal tendencies. So I think I've spent too much time on that. Coming back to Dolly and Stiva, which largely goes missing, is that Dolly is, for Tolstoy, exemplifies this the idea of ordinary love that is really low on expectations from others, and it's more other directed, oriented towards children and family. And after a point, Dolly realizes that Steve is not going to be a reliable partner. He is apathetic, he is careless, and she takes it upon herself to build her children. And it is both from the feminist critique and accusation against the author, that is Tolstoy's own tendencies or privileging of certain idea of a family. If those of you who read would know that it begins with all happy families are alike, and I'm paraphrasing, and all unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. There is unique ways in which you descend into unhappiness. And Dolly represents that exemplification of this phenomena of caring, attentive, thoughtful, nurturing love, whereas Anna is the contrast here. very tragic figure who has a very total view of what it means to be in love. So completely demanding, self-directed, narcissistic in some senses. And as a consequence, it has to end for Tolstoy, the author, in tragic ways. And whereas Levin and Kitty grow into understanding each other, having these routine disruptions of family life reenacted, and yet possibilities of reconciliation of differences and two people coming together to not so much have a happy life thereafter, which is not what it is. In fact, book 8, which is the epilogue, is a instructive passage in terms of understanding ethics, ethical thinking in these kind of situations, and which goes missing in the movie. It just gets one or two lines, I think, which is a tragedy because it is Levin's own development as a human being, as a philosopher. So Levin begins by, like a contemporary intellectual, wanting to write a book about modernizing agriculture. And he believes for a long time, particularly when he was frustrated with after having failed to persuade Kitty, he thinks he will write a book that will revolutionize agriculture. So he reads and reads and reads everyone and thinks that he has a great idea, which is reducible to the idea of the labor. And then he realizes that all of this reading that is a received wisdom is making no difference to his own practices. And he realizes the only true wisdom is the one he gains through his own experiences, from the people's personal experiences. And he is a aristocrat who's wedded to his land, and he becomes, it's a developmental novel in terms of Levin's own evolution to acquire this kind of wisdom, which is what Ludwig Wittgenstein. So I read all through his eyes in a way, I mean, to the extent I understood. And this book 8 was very, very crucial, it seems to me, for him. So the authenticity, ethical complexity, and in a way, Dostoevsky criticized this book. The book 8 became focus of Dostoevsky's own criticism, which I will come back if we want to elaborate on this. The critique that Dostoevsky offers to book 8, where essentially Levin was asked by his brother, who was a philosopher, they all meet on the farm on this particular occasion after Nana has died, and a lot has happened, and they meet on the farm, and then there's this war going on between the Turks and the Slavs, and the whole popular opinion has been mobilized, and his brother, Levin's brother, who's a philosopher in Moscow, who is part of this mobilization. He's an intellectual force behind a lot that was going on, and he tries to impress on his brother Levin to commit to this cause, and Levin is reluctant, and he is reluctant because he doesn't understand why there's so much excitement about things that are so far off, and he doesn't understand what it means to be part of a public opinion, mobilization of public opinion, which Dostoevsky thought is escaping responsibility, and he wrote a very long critique of this particular aspect of Anna Karenina, although he said about Anna Karenina somewhat like this, that he said, Tolstoy's this particular novel justifies the existence of Russian people. This is a very high price coming from Dostoevsky. Means only in Russia, someone would say the existence of a nation is justified by a literary outcropping, as it were. I think I'll stop here, Professor Nicola, and if there are, we can, I think, open up and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Krishnappa. It was wonderful for you to bring in all your reading of Russian literature, philosophy, also bringing in, the analysis of various characters, which, many of us have read as novels and as the novel, and now we have watched this particular film. I open out the film and Professor Krishnappa's presentation for discussion. Would anyone like to go in first? Yes,
Can I,
Geeta, please,
can I
please go
come
ahead.
in?
Yeah, yeah, please go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much for that introduction to the film. And I was thinking it would be really illuminating for us if you could say something about the whole, the basis of Tolstoy's philosophical thinking as it reflects in Anna Karenina, because for Tolstoy, freedom was the ultimate goal of every human being through the exercise of free will. So, what would you have to say with regard to this question of free will and freedom, especially in the trajectory of Anna's characterization? Like, was it an exercise of free will, or was it just an unthinking passion on Anna's part, which is what most of us would think it is? And if it is the exercise of free will, then in the in the existentialist sense, it, and then like you brought in the question of ethics as well. So how, or how could she commit suicide, in that sense, in the more narrowly ethical sense? And if this is the meaning of the exercise of free will, then is it justified to have free will at all? And the question of freedom, uh, did Anna actually want to, did Anna think of freedom in, think of death as liberating, death as freedom? What was it that she really had in mind, when she committed suicide? I mean, I don't think any suicide is impulsive. It is, at many levels, a well thought out action. So is it that? And apart from this, of course, I thought the cinematic aspects of it were very beautifully done. And there is a stage, on, and we see the action on the stage. So you have, I mean, as a spectator, it is as if the filmmaker wants to, wants to make it like a theater, as if we are watching it on the stage. So there is that, uh, there is some kind of a way in which voyeurism is built into the film as well. And also the use of the veil for Anna, like, in a sense, she is trapped by that veil also, which is, like, very closely stuck to the skin of her face. And um, and the, and and her vision through the veil, some in some sense limiting. So I thought the use of the veil for Anna was very interesting. These are some of my thoughts.
Thank you, ma'am. Before I answer your question, may I take the liberty to recognize my friend We've been very old friends from Hyderabad. We were together as cadets. Who joined us from London. He's an artist. Welcome, Navdeep. Thank you for joining. I am. I'll just by and large.
Thanks.
Hi, Navdeep.
Thanks for the intro, Krish. Great to meet everyone. Yes, I mean, I'm looking forward to having this discussion, and it's very interesting aspects that so far have already been raised, and I hope to get into a much more intense discussion, so as to say. Thanks, Krish. Thanks, everyone.
Seeing you, my friend. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you asked me about the first question. I leave the cinematic aspects to you and others, but first one is something I can share some thoughts on. The question of freedom, in that sense, Tolstoy is very much an existentialist in the sense of Anna Karenina. Right? He saw there is no human situation where there is no freedom. There are constraints for sure, but there is freedom, and we can train ourselves. What is more important for Tolstoy, going beyond the existentialist philosophy of the French kind later. Of course, the original existentialist is Dostoevsky. Tolstoy believed that habits have a very crucial role in exercise of our will, our capacity, because our life is led mostly non-consciously. To the extent we train ourselves in our ordinary moments, in these tiny moments of our life, that we are able to be more or less behave ethically, conduct ourselves in a way towards finding meaning, as it were, to our lives, which are otherwise absurd. So in Levin, we see this kind of ups and downs in his own struggles to find meaning, seeing absurdity, particularly when his brother dies, first moment when his brother dies, and death is very central to Dostoevsky, Heidegger, and to the existentialists in general, because that's a moment of some kind of a reckoning and creation of certain authentic awareness. So there is always freedom, and Anna did have choices, but Anna came from a particular kind of a childhood upbringing and orientation towards life, a family that is more inclined towards passion, like our brother Steva suggests. So this inner drives towards passionate fulfillments, as opposed to more constrained and yet in some sense, like in the case of Levin, more driven towards searching for profound, non-material spiritual development. That, in a way, implicit in this is that both Steva and Anna are creatures of their passions. They are unable to train themselves, restrain themselves from consciously make choices, because part of falling in love with Vronsky, with Anna, is that she never made a decision to fall in love with him. She never sat down and said, oh, for this or that reason, Vronsky is an attractive man, or a man that I would want to spend my life with. It never happened. She never chose Vronsky. It just happened. Things happened to her. And she somehow seems to rolling on from one moment of crisis to another, spiraling in a way eventually. Romantic love is a kind of an ideology. It is a totalizing idea. No human being in partnership with a romantic lover can satisfy that quest for complete surrender and complete control. And Anna saw in these binary terms, her relationship with Vronsky is, he has to be totally devoted to her, see no other woman, have no other life, but merely, constantly, continually, irrepressibly give expression to passionate love, which is impossible for any. Towards in the novel, at least, it will become very clear that Vronsky actually grows and develops spiritually. He was a flippant young person, but he gets serious, and he was really committed to make things happen between him and Anna. But Anna could never satisfy herself with these flawed human beings, with their finitude and their other distractions that always dictate human lives, that could never satisfy her. And so in a way, it's ideological, it is semiotic totalism, meaning that there is either love, there is otherwise hatred. And Anna wanted to take revenge on Vronsky for neglect, for loss of passion, what she felt that he is losing interest in her. And her suicide is partly motivated. If at all there is something motivates her in a conscious sense. And there are explicit statements being issued by her on 2 occasions in the novel. And it comes out in the movie as well, that where she wanted to teach Vronsky a lesson even for neglecting her, for distracting himself with other suspect women, because she didn't have a particular other women to suspect. So she finds she's searching for someone to suspect. That is the state she reaches. So she's desperately looking for a scapegoat, as it were, someone she can blame for her troubles. And not having found one, she eventually dies not having found one, a real target, because Vronsky was not doing anything that is, quote unquote, should have been for a sensible, balanced, non-romantic person you would find objectionable. He was trying to fulfill his obligations as a partner in her life, and he wanted her to get divorced and they live a happy life. But she had other more possessed notion of what it means to be loving another human being, which is to dehumanize. That love is a very dehumanizing love. So there's an implicit critique in Tolstoy about why this idea of romantic love is such a loss of sense, like it's an ideology. It is possessive, it is demonic, and it dehumanizes the other in the relationship. The thickly others the other. So it's a loss of freedom in a way to make manageable, meaningful decisions that give rise to healthy, balanced, or thoughtful, attentive relationships. So this is a long answer, possibly. I don't know if I answered your question, but I wanted to say something.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anyone else would like to come in now? Yes,
Yes.
Abhishek, please go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, so thank you, Professor Krishnappa, for that wonderful analysis. And I quite enjoyed this this Brechtian experiment in cinema. So yeah, so Tolstoy's views on romantic love are indeed very extreme, and as we see in his novella, The Kreutzer Sonata, where he totally calls it unnatural, and this idea of free will there too is very limited. Free will is limited to this man traveling in trains and confessing to fellow passengers that he has murdered his wife because of the impossibility of romantic love, and it is in some sense it is quite it is extremely Catholic of Tolstoy, and in fact, in Kreutzer Sonata, he totally negates it and says that these carnal relationships should be completely stopped, and the human race should go extinct and all of that. It is quite entertaining in its extremity. So we see this recurring thing in Tolstoy, and as we see in his books, A Confession and What I Believe, that he is constantly tortured by the idea of lust and carnal relationships, and in fact, he influenced Gandhi too. Uh, in this sense, this is his view on romantic love, and it is very anti-modern to especially Anna Karenina dying, on the railway track, mauled by a train. Tolstoy hated trains, and in fact. Tolstoy too tried to exercise that limited free will in his old age by sort of running away from home, and was again found dead in a railway station. So this idea of the railways being a kind of threat to what is natural, and all of this. And what I also enjoyed about this film, there have been many adaptations of Anna Karenina, and none of them have been very memorable, although Greta Garbo and Vivian Leigh have played this character. But here, the conceit of the theater, I think, works really well. Because such a novel, the challenge of adapting such a novel would be, the realist mode. Tolstoy's very, the staunch attention to detail, and this this kind of a cautionary tale for passionate women. We see this all through the 19th century. We see this in Anna Karenina, and its French double in Madame Bovary by Flaubert. So, and at the end, the women have to die. And this also sort of coincided with the rise of, hysteria and the study, the need to study hysteria in 19th century Europe. So this conceit of the theater works very well because in Imperial Russia, there was this identity crisis, and their whole public life was lived as if they were living on the stage, and it was an imitation of the French, and they were quite sort of comfortable with French too. So that I thought worked really well in this film. So Tolstoy has extremely conservative views on love and sex, and then this need to be cautionary about a woman transgressing. So all of this, makes it a very interesting sort of text, and I absolutely enjoy reading it whenever I get the chance to read it, Anna Karenina, purely because of the immersive experience and the attention to detail, which obviously can't be captured in a film. But I thought that this was quite an interesting attempt. So.
Just a quick response to you, Abhishek. There has been a feminist reading of Anna Karenina. It largely remained unpersuasive for most other feminist readers. There have been few who took this line that she has to die because she transgressed the rules of the man's world, as it were, which will only kill her as a consequence. And nothing in the novel itself suggests that Tolstoy wanted Anna to die. In fact, he almost seems to make the reader wanting to tell her, hey, why are you doing this to yourself? Why do you have to do this to yourself? So there was nothing deterministic in the novel itself, as you are a good and careful reader, would suggest that Tolstoy set some inevitability to Anna's end. There was no good reason why she had to die, and nowhere there is an authorial comment or even an implied suggestion that her crime of adultery is a real crime. The real crime is not adultery. The real crime is this totalizing nature of our expectation. So adultery itself could, as far as Tolstoy was concerned, doesn't seem to be the main problem that why Anna has to go. She was given multiple opportunities to exit out of the adultery, the situation that she was in, but she chooses otherwise. So our problem in the dominant reading of romantic love, this is that she died because her own doing, in a way. It is nothing to do with adultery, at least in that particular dominant reading of on this issue, as it is now kind of a settled scholarship. So the feminist reading is unpersuasive. But I'm not saying this, range of women who have taken interest in the novel from the feminist angle have come to the somewhat of a conclusion that I'm suggesting to you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Navdeep Malhotra ji, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to kind of just add a couple of points which I kind of found quite relevant and very interesting. So, as Professor Krishnap said, that there have been many adaptations of the Anna Karenina. And of course, with these multiple characters and this huge text of great character development and in-depth psychologically complex characters. So as Abhishek also said, apparently, and Krish also corroborated to that this film is a good adaptation of this huge character, because from a filmmaker's point of view, I think the challenges are huge in terms of how to capture this complex piece of work in a narrative which is visual narrative, and I guess the filmmakers, not a filmmaker, but filmmakers, the whole team has to take very calculated sort of risks into as to what to include, what not include, what scenes to really kind of and how to film them, and so I guess I haven't seen the whole film fully, but I've seen excerpts for it. But now, after getting into this discussion, I think it's making me want to see it all the more, because I think it seems to have done a huge justice to the whole subject, I guess, to the characters and to the novella or to the piece of work or literature itself. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to actually seeing the film now, because I think it's a good effort and seems like worth it. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Anyone else? Yeah, just to also come in before, take the chance to talk about the film before others do. I was thinking of, two things. One, of course, as Abhishek has mentioned, and others also have spoken about the theatricality of the making of this film. So it was wonderful to watch, characters move from one level of the stage, they go up and then they are in a new world. So Moscow to Petersburg, you just move by moving up a level or climbing down a ladder. So I thought, it's almost operatic. So you almost watch it like an opera, though there isn't any great music or anything. It's almost like you're watching a period piece. So it worked very well in this form, and I was just asking myself why this form, or what effect this kind of a form has. Probably for fixing this film, fixing the plot of this story in a bygone era, also like taking it out of its present day context and bringing, its constructedness to the fore, so that maybe it is saying these are questions of the past, of a different time, of a different society. Because generally when adaptations happen, there is also a process of updating. This film is not attempting, I think, to do that. It is kind of restoring it to its time. So I was wondering if maybe the technique of staging that is done, maybe for that purpose. The second comment, again, I was thinking about the pairs of characters that you mentioned, Professor Krishnappa, right at the outset. Yes, to me, they all represent certain kinds of moral marital types. So as you said, Steva and Dolly, and Anna's intervention, and it's not like Dolly is not aware of what she's, what a ordeal she has, but Anna's intervention kind of helps set it right in a way. So it's also meant as a plot contrast to tell us Anna, who could see something with such clarity with regard to Dolly, why doesn't she see it for her own life, probably. But also, I think, for instance, Levin, when he visits his sick brother and he sees the woman with his brother, he's extremely judgmental. Very moralistic about that kind of a woman, whom his brother is with. And yet, when Kitty comes and takes care of the needs of, takes care of bodily cleaning up the brother when he comes, and the woman is also there, there is a certain kind of moral growth, because I felt that he's not so judgmental at that point in time. So what I'm saying is that these characters are also meant to be, pitted against each other, seen in relation with each other. And when you come to Anna and Karenin, one of the things that I feel happens very strongly in that relationship is the way the perception of, Karenin, the husband, changes both in the novel and to some extent even in the film. I think in the novel, Tolstoy, for all his conservatism, is coming down heavily on, he's such a stuffy, dry kind of a man. I mean, it's not a crime. It's not that it's reason. One may think that it's not reason for Anna to transgress, but it is. And so he's probably sympathetic with the way Karenin appears to Anna, the age difference, and his own bureaucratic, manner of thinking, which does not respond to any of the passions that Anna seems to have. But also with regard to Vronsky, it's not, I felt, it's not so much Anna's, of course, the expectations, as you said, are insurmountable. No one can live up to the kind of expectations that she seems to have. But it also comes from a certain kind of a perception where, as we see in the film and also in the novel, she starts seeing herself and Vronsky through the eyes of people around her. So there is a certain obliviousness, when in the initial part, and a certain carefreeness when she's totally mesmerized by Vronsky, but slowly the unraveling happens, not so much of her own doing, I think, but largely by the way the facade of St. Petersburg society kind of crumbles down. Its own hypocrisies get exposed, and I feel Anna, kind of is a victim of that process. Where it's easy now for people to point her out as a woman who's left a good marriage and a so-called good husband and is destroying herself. But really it is about the pettiness of that society itself that I felt comes across fairly strongly in the film. And I would also like to tell Abhishek that I really enjoyed your reading of the film and I mean of the novel and the characterization as well, Abhishek. Thank you very much, Professor Krishnappa and Abhishek. Yeah.
Yeah, just to provoke possibly further thoughts and further engagement. I agree with you. If you take the sum of all the events that happen, certainly, are we lost the? You can
No,
hear
I'm
me?
there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I think it's a common consensus among commentators on Anna Karenina in the literary studies is that Tolstoy started as being hostile to Anna as a character. There is a prehistory of the novel, and when he started working on the first draft, he wanted to punish erring woman. But as he develops the character, he makes her a very complex figure and somewhat sympathetic to her struggles. And you are absolutely right that he wanted to expose. Tolstoy had a long feud with Petersburg, society, and he saw them as artificial, hypocritical, deceit, self-deceiving kind of a society that he found more offensive than adultery. Adultery is not such an offense for Tolstoy, but the Petersburg society is kind of a inauthentic, farcical, superficial, and he uses various characters, including this character Betsy, to show that the hypocrisy of St. Petersburg society, in contrast to society in Moscow, where Levin and Sherbatskaya's, the Kitty's family, belong. So Tolstoy, by and large, is sympathetic to Anna and her struggles. But is Anna a victim of all this? Like, so I think we come back to Professor Geeta Vishwanath's earlier question, that even though there was all this going on, at multiple points, she had a choice to do otherwise. And for some reason, I'm not saying for a particular reason, that doesn't happen. She doesn't take conscious account of her situation and act upon it. So she chooses to descend non-consciously most of the time from one event to another. While all of these external circumstances are adding on to that, for sure. So she was not alone. She was embedded, and she expected people to respond in certain ways, and those expectations could not be met given the constraints. And I wanted to, in the same vein, I wanted to say something about Levin and his attitude towards this his mistress of his brother. In the novel, it is a bit more complex. In the movie, they have caricatured it. In the novel, he never showed any hostile attitude towards her, except in the conventions of the rural society that he was in. It would have been odd for his wife to be involved with a woman like that. That is the only place where he shows some conservative attitude to if at all it is. But he was considerate, very thoughtful, and very accepting of his brother, who was in a way a communist revolutionary. The the problem with Anna and her life has been one of abstraction, abstracting away from our embeddedness. So some of the troubles come from Tolstoy's perspective of the fact that she is thinking in abstract categories, not dealing with real situation. As in, for example, she could have easily avoided this exposure in the theater. And Ronsky tries to suggest to her that this may not be a right thing to happen for her. And she chooses to react impulsively, as if that she would transgress in a meaningful sense there. But what really happens is further reinforcement of these negative energies that eventually help her or drive her further and further and further away from reality, as it was. So she gets detached from reality. That is the one of the troubles that Tolstoy seems to be suggesting. By and large, I find the characterization of Anna so complex, so profound. Because if you remember, their first consummation of love between Ronsky and Anna is, she says, murder. In the sense that she was at some level aware of this transgression to be far more serious than the text on the surface suggests. So she's a profound character, but also someone whose tragedy lies in the fact that she is thinking in abstract terms, as opposed to someone like Dolly, who's very grounded, and Kitty in the middle, very grounded and very thinking with real people. This is also the conflict between Levin and his brother, the philosopher. The philosopher thinks in abstract terms. He has a very good romantic vision of the farmers, peasants that Levin works with. He comes to spend time with his brother, and he's always praising the farmers. When Levin is forced to define what he thinks about the peasants that he works with, he doesn't have one answer. He has multiple answers. So certain, theoretical detachment that is happening with Levin's philosopher brother, that is Sergei Ivanovich, that is the brother who rarely appears in the film, is also the case with Anna. Both are facing this challenge of being detached from reality, as it were, through in abstract categories of thinking.
Yeah, anyone else would like to come in now? Yes. Yes, please.
I don't know. I think, have we finished with the time? I guess it's already 1 hour.
We don't have a time limit.
No, we are limitless in terms of time, so don't worry. Yeah.
That's a healthy thought for such a discussion. No. I think a couple of things that were coming to my head. I mean, it's like, because I guess everybody in this forum is discussing the film from a perspective that seemingly all of you are familiar with Tolstoy and the work and the Anna Karenina, the novel itself. I was just wondering as to how can we rate the film to have done justice to the novel from a perspective that people who know Tolstoy and who know Anna Karenina and all the characters, or for someone who is completely seeing the film as a fresher, as some who's never read Tolstoy or never read Anna Karenina as such. That was the first point, in which the filmmakers will have the challenge to be able to have a narrative that still does justice to all the characters which Tolstoy intended, and that also to kind of keep it in the same sort of in terms of dealing with all the complexity, because in a written format, I guess the author has the liberty to be able to discuss and devote chapters to discussing characters' arcs, why they did that, why they didn't do that, the decision that they took, and discuss in depth the scenarios. But in a film, I guess you have to kind of really leave a lot of questions unanswered. So, and the beauty of a lot of films is in which they where the film depicts conflict of character through the character arc and from the beginning to the end. And in the end leaves the audience with a lot of questions which they keep on pondering and thinking for hours and hours. And then that's what makes a good film. So from these two perspectives, I was just thinking what would you think the film rates as? I think you rated it pretty well otherwise. But from a perspective, if somebody like me, I haven't read Tolstoy, in fact, I haven't read Anna Karenina. I've just probably, I know something about what it kind of entails with, but if I see a film from what justice will it do to me? I mean, I'm just wondering from that perspective. Yeah, interesting perspective can be. Yeah, thanks. I mean, just raising a few questions.
Yeah, would Professor Krishnappa, would you like to address this?
I can say for myself, I can speak for myself. As I began by saying, I'm very wary and suspicious of adaptations of realist novels. For me, my taste is as such. If a novel is less than 500 pages, I don't pick it up usually. It has to be that large. So that's a question of taste. But despite that, I said, of all the possible, I've watched a few of the older movies and also the serials, various adaptations of serials and drama, radio drama. BBC has done very good radio drama on this. I would say that this was a very good, in terms, see, I don't care about the sequence. I do not care about the exact words or historical context. What I'm looking for so I read like a philosopher reads. Now I have some philosophical points, but which I didn't read out for you, that have been staple for me for a while. But I look for effects, like what is it creating similar effects on me, like novel does. So I'm not coming to this with a clean slate, as it were, right? I'm loaded, fully loaded. So with all my prejudices towards different medium too. But I think this was a very good effort. This was very clever. The use of theater is part of it. Because
and even using the caricatures also, did it help in time of kind of, had it been a realistic characters, maybe it would be difficult to deal with Placer Dubai, making them painting those caricature characters. I think it helped in the narrative to make it gel with the
so
theater
leaving out gaps. So one of the things about good philosophical literary text is it doesn't explain everything to you. It shows rather than tells you. So it should leave some work to be done by the viewer. And it is not, this one is not an easy movie from typical Hollywood plot style, right? Like you can immerse and very lightly pay attention, or periphery of your attention is good enough. Here you have to concentrate to see the connections, the flow of events. Otherwise, you will miss out some very significant connections. So it demands a lot of attention, which I appreciate, because a movie that doesn't demand good attention is not very useful as a thinking, any text, a thinking text, something that provokes your own thoughts, which is very, very important for me. In that sense, this one was a good, clever, artistic creation that could. I showed this in the last semester to my students, and they were actually very excited about they have read the Anna Karenina before they were shown the movie, and they enjoyed the movie too. But I wanted to just, Navdeep, if you permit me, go back to Abhishek a bit. Abhishek's point about conversion of Tolstoy. There is a phase after Anna Karenina where Tolstoy denounces art itself. And so, as Isaiah Berlin tries to show in his Hedgehog and the Fox essay, that there are two phases, I mean, recognizable phases of Tolstoy. One before Anna Karenina and before, and one after Anna Karenina. Although the artist in him never dies, but he acquires overtones of morality in later writings. They're very direct, they're telling, they're pronouncing on the world, as opposed to a novel like Anna Karenina, where the ethical is implicit. That is something reader will have to figure out for himself or herself. Whereas in the other writings that come later, Tolstoy tends to be more overt and pedagogical, overtly pedagogical. So there is that frame of reference to think about when you are thinking about Tolstoy's later works, post 1880s, post Anna Karenina. But he never stops being an artist. That details that you are talking about is very true. Even there, even in those writings that what Isaiah Berlin tries to show is that there is a hedgehog, that is a theoretician or a moralist, standing high ground and pronouncing on the world, who is struggling with this artist who's like a fox. And the fox is the most powerful element in Tolstoy, and that remains to be the case. Even towards the end, he wrote stories that are fox-like, comes back to the art, but there is a phase in between he produces texts that are artistically very offensive.
Okay, anyone else would like to come in at this point? Tarakeshwar?
Okay.
Yeah.
In
Please
the,
go ahead.
the discussion is very interesting, but somehow I was thinking that we are using the film as a kind of pretext to talk about Tolstoy's novel Anna Karenina. As you said in the beginning, there are two different texts. Though one has a relationship with the other, and you can call that relationship as adaptation or semiotic translation, whatever the relationship is. But they're two different things. But there is a relationship between the two. Though it might claim that it is based on that, what is this based on? There is a difference. So somewhere we are overlooking the difference. Though you initially said that you mistrust the quote unquote the adaptations, but somehow you were taken in by this particular film. The issue
to some
of
extent.
to
some extent.
Okay. The issue of Anna Karenina as a character and Tolstoy's attitude towards it, that has been the discussion, whether Tolstoy was against modernity and the train crushes her and like that, or was it was he taking a moral stand vis-a-vis Anna Karenina by killing that character in the plot? But that problem is again the problem of reading the text and trying to attribute our interpretation of the text to the authorial intention. And but the problem could be solved by looking at text as a text, and whatever the authorial intention, whatever the intention of the author, but if it has a realistic mode of representation, as Marxist critics like George Lukács says, even the bourgeois writers reveal the inner workings of the period in which the text is produced, in spite of their ideological orientation. So in that sense, irrespective of Tolstoy, the text reveals the contradictions and that exist in that particular society. So in that sense, all the characters becomes very dense and very complex, where we can take any different position and then we can go on arguing about it. So that's the positive point about this realistic mode of presentation, where things are not twisted to a particular desired effect at the end of the plot. But That is about the novel. But the film doesn't use a realistic mode of presentation. As everyone has pointed out, the film is using a different kind of narrative, where it is not presenting it as realistic. It is presenting it as a kind of drama, where we know their characters, where we know the scene is shifting, and we know it's a kind of not even drama, but it also reveals the curtains and then what lies behind the curtain too. When the curtain is lifted and the curtain is down, or here it not a curtain but the doors, windows, that they open from seamlessly from one word to another or one space to another. So this mode of presentation is slightly dramatic, if I have to use, highly cinematic, bordering on some kind of magical realism, if not. So in that sense, what this mode of representation that is adapted in the film is doing to the text is something that we need to probe further, rather than simply accepting that it represents the text more or less in a proper way. That was only the point that I wanted to. Thank you.
So as I said, I look for effects. I mean, effects on the viewer or the reader, and in that sense, I was asking, is it causing somewhat similar effects as reading a text, even though the events, incidents, the narrative texture, the density is not very similar? My answer is, by and large, yes. I feel like it makes you to think, whether you call it magic realism or experimental cinema of sorts, or because there's a gaps. There are trials going on here in this movie, I think, in terms of how to make a cinema itself, or meta effort at cinema making of a complex text. So I would say that part of why this discussion went the way it went, because I have no expertise in cinema, so all I could do is to speak from where I could speak from. Possibly you're right in pointing out this juncture, which is very, very important. That's where our conversations are possible, right? Like the idea that whether we are talking about same thing, or should we even make this connection? But whether we want to make in this forum or not, large number of audience possibly go and watch a movie because Anna Karenina is a famous literary text, and they're expecting somewhat of connections to be made, which is but you are absolutely right. In fact, this is a third level of abstracting away from the text, this movie. I don't know if Tom Stoppard is the screenplay writer, and he wrote a very long text, and there is a controversy about adapting this text further in the movie. So the third degree removed from the actual text. So there are all those struggles going on in getting to this point where you have the particular type of a movie. So you're right. Like, it's always, I think, going back to Navdeep's point too, I think it's very important, at least for the audience that have professional interest, to somewhat, as Professor Tarakeshwar is pointing, detach the original text from the movie somewhat. As you rightly point out, it is impossible to completely detach that. But rest, how the discussion went this evening has to do possibly, the initial point where I am coming in not knowing, even if you ask me honestly, who are these actors, what are the entire set of actors, I won't know. And it doesn't matter for my purposes. But if you are someone who has specialist interest in cinema, those things matter. So I think that's where we kind of took this conversation this evening.
No, I
But I
agree.
guess it's a good point. Sorry, Kalkreshwar, because you pointed out that it's a dramatization. It's kind of embellishing it with a lot of theatrical and almost come to the level of being a musical, not a musical, but but kind of bringing elements of extreme cinema making, magical cinema making. I think the characters as such, Anna Karenina, and the conflicts faced by these characters are very common. I guess, I mean, it's because eventually, like we said, like we know that Shakespeare in his in his theater, he actually touched on all story plots that could ever be. Similarly, I guess, I mean, the characters are complex, very complex, in set in a particular time and space. But they are very common. I mean, now if you look at most love stories, they're all about the same conflicts. So you see society, it faces, and we come across the same family conflicts, dilemmas that probably which are very similar and very common. But I think what makes this film is because it's Anna Karenina. And I think from a filmmaker's perspective, it's a challenge how to make an adaptation of Anna Karenina to make it interesting. And it's a statement that probably the filmmakers have to kind of qualify their film to be worth all the money that goes in. So that's why I guess that's why this format and this intelligent selection. But eventually, most of the people are likely to see this as the retelling of Anna Karenina or the story of Anna Karenina, the Tolstoy character. Oh, yeah, it's not to be viewed in isolation. I mean, it would be worthy of seeing in isolation, but I think the intention of creating this sort of piece of art as a cinema, as film, is with that objective.
Yeah, if I was telling the students, my advice to them would be, it's not a substitute for actual reading of Anna Karenina. And I also say this, that, there are aspects and dimensions that come out of a moving image that will not be found in the text. While these can be detached at some level, but remember that this movie can throw up, for someone like me, I spent time watching it only because, not because I was looking for veracity or whatever, accuracy or whatever, but is there something it will do to me that the text itself did not do, but I'll revisit the text by this experience. So there are benefits to be gained by, experiencing different medium of literary reproductions. But I think, Abhishek, just a second, I think Professor Tarakeshwar, you wanted to say something on that.
Yeah, I agree with you that as teachers, we use film as a kind of pedagogical tool to push students towards the print reading. So from my MA days, we have done that. So whenever there is a prescribed text, we watch the film and then again went back to the text. Fine, there's a kind of pedagogical tool. And then as long as we are aware of that, there is a difference. But there is also a similarity between the two because it is based on that. So in that sense, it is not completely different. So there is a similarity. So, but the point that I was trying to stress was, though there is a similarity, but there is also a difference between the two. So we should also look at this difference. And what does this difference tell us? And I'm not valorizing the novel as an original and somehow the film is corrupting it. I'm simply saying there are two different texts. And because I'm hesitating to call the novel also as original because I've read it in English. So it was not written in English. And it was written in Russian. And there are 4 translations in English itself.
More than 4.
No, maybe, yeah.
About 20. And I have right here about 12 of them.
Oh, fine. So then I haven't even come across those translations. So in that sense, I don't subscribe to that idea for original. But whatever the English version that we read, and that text and then this film, they're 2 different texts. But there is a relationship between them. That is one of similarity, but also difference. So that difference also we need to look at and then look at this text also autonomously. I completely agree that whenever there is a filmic adaptation of the literary text, there is a renewed interest in the text itself. So in fact, we have observed that whenever a film is made in India, which is based on a text in Indian language, also there is a translation that accompanies that, which comes out along with the film. So there is an interest in the new translation of the text and also reading the text in translation along with the film. So to that extent, yes, there is a relationship, and this creates a new relationship between the text. But another point I wanted to say is that is also about the affect. Though I read the novel when I was in MA, that was more than nearly 29, 30 years back. Now I watch the film, but somehow the effect that the novel, when I read it, had on me, this film couldn't have it. Somehow, because it is the a priori that is there in our mind, which the way it tells me to receive certain things now. Because you might have read the novel now, and you're seeing this as an extension. So that a priori, the readings of the novel is overimposed on the text too. Or in my case, the way I read the novel and my imagination of the novel is fossilized in my memory. And that fossil has grown on its own over the period of time. Now suddenly this film comes, and I am looking at this film from that, a memory which has grown within me for 25 years, and I'm not able to reconcile this film with that, my memory of the reading of the novel 25 years back. So in that sense, I did not get that effect. But I agree that the text could have different effects and different people depending on what they bring into their reading of the text. Thank you for suggesting this film and the way you led the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. There is no question that, again, as you say, it's also our reading effects are temporal. It depends on our age and our particular projects, ongoing projects, pedagogical interests, and range of things going to our readings. There is no one single way, even one individual comes to read. Like I read this as a kind of a very biannual exercise, like every 2 years. 1 year I read Anna Karenina, and 1 year I read the War and Peace fully. And each time I'm discovering new things, and the text remains the same. Of course, on this importance of translations, this is one of the most translated literary texts possibly, and they're easily available translations. Unlike in some cases, the translations have been gone into some oblivion. In Anna Karenina and War and Peace, you get all the translations, almost like a dozen of them, different translations. Garnett himself, herself, Garnett's translation itself has gone through 3 different iterations with different introductions and changes in language over time. So there's this interesting, and I read multiple because not knowing Russian, this is one way to find a proximate substitute for that. Like you get richer understanding of expressions and events, etc., by doing that. Sorry, Abhishek, you had something to add.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of people actually study Russian in order to read Anna Karenina in its
Yes. I wish I could do that. I never got an opportunity.
Yeah. So speaking about this as a film, so this is a part of a trilogy by Joe Wright of his literary adaptations, and each one of them is different. All of them starring Keira Knightley, the actress who plays Anna. So he has made Pride and Prejudice, which is made in a very realist mode. Then Atonement, Ian McKellen's Atonement, which is in a very postmodernist mode. And this is, if I may call it, post-dramatic. So it's a very interesting sort of trilogy. And he stops with this because Anna Karenina, I think, was not as successful as the other two. And also, a period film is always a fantasy, because nobody really knows, how people used to live back in the day. So it is always the projection of our fantasies and, how we have imagined nostalgia to be. So yeah, that is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. I don't think there is ever a complete or comprehensive or satisfying reconstruction of what constitutes a period in terms of various social and political and psychological forces at work. So that is, I will agree with you. It is a not so much a fantasy as it will always remain an approximation and a creation. It's never a document of a kind that you would claim some expert knowledge claims. It would be a offer that can be more or less persuasive to the contemporary audience than so I wouldn't call it a fantasy, because that would be to suggest that there is no basis in some reasoned sense of reconstruction, but it's an approximation that would always remain from one point or the other, an approximation, and therefore unsatisfying from one perspective or the other. I will agree with that kind of a characterization.
Thank you, sir.
Very interesting points that have come up in the last 10 minutes. One is that your perception through the time as you progress in your age. The films that I watched 20 years back, some of them flew on top of my head, and when I watch them again, they are a completely different experience altogether. Similarly, with what Professor Krish mentioned, that he reads these huge pieces of literary work, but every time you read it, there's a different perception because of your own character arc, which has progressed in time. So I guess as filmmakers, when you do adaptations, I think there are huge challenges that you're faced with. I mean, that John Wright must have been faced with in terms of as to what decisions to take, which whom to target in your venture. I mean, it must be, and then people who've read texts, they've formed opinions in their minds, and when they see the film, it's a complete shattering. Many a times, a shattering experience of domestic. What this is not what I thought it was, and it actually it's very difficult for people to actually see the film of literally work that they've loved. And they've, for example, my favorite novel, if it gets made into a film, it will completely kind of have a different vision, and the characters will be different. And what I've lived with those characters, or which I've kind of formed in my head, they might be shattered. So, yeah, that's a good. I mean, I'm just kind of trying to look from a filmmaker's perspective and as to what challenges they face, and and how to kind of overcome them, because eventually making a film costs money, and you're looking at it to be some success, so as to get some money back, because eventually it's a business venture. Thanks.
Navdeep, you should join this group. I think Professor Nicola will be and Professor Geeta Vishwanath will be happy to have you meet every weekends like this.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I certainly will look forward to, because I mean, I'm in discussing about cinema, filmmaking, all this, and I mean, I certainly do have interest in all that, and it's very invigorating to be able to talk to people who have similar interests. Yeah, thanks.
Anyone else would like to come in? All of you are welcome to join the discussion every Saturday. This has been an ongoing discussion every Saturday at 9 p.m. We all join to discuss a pre-decided film. So those who have joined for the first time, you're most welcome to join us every week. Anyone else would like to?
I just wanted to make one last statement. Every reading to me is a confession. So, and the confessions are always dynamic in the sense they never remain static. We have different things to confess to the text or a movie that you watch at different times in our lives. So, yeah, it's an ongoing process, and as I said, I make it a religious effort, almost like a religious diktat that I read. Anna Karenina every second year and War and Peace every alternate years. So it's been on for now 20 years. And so I can, it's not a forum, but we could discuss that kind of a reading another time.
Anyone else? Sridhar, Pradeep, anyone would like to come in?
No, nothing from my end.
Okay. Generally, after every discussion, when Geeta and I sit to do our post-mortem, we say that if a discussion has gone on beyond 10:30, it's a successful discussion. So I think today again we can announce that it's been a really, really successful discussion. We all enjoyed very much the way in which you introduced the film, Professor Krishnappa, and also your engagement with all the points that came up in the course of the discussion. We saw so many different perspectives coming in, both on the novel and the film as adaptation. Thank you very much, Professor Krishnappa, and thanks to everyone who joined today for the discussion. We hope you will all find time to join us next Saturday for yet another film discussion on Talking Films Online. Till then, good night. Have a nice weekend.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night. See you next
Good night.
week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.